In this video, we're going to cover the 5 in-game flasks and 12 transmute recipes that an alchemist can craft in vanilla WoW. Now before we begin, hit that like button and hit that bell as well so you're notified whenever a new video comes out from me. Someone was telling me recently even that didn't notify them, so come join my Discord as well where I post each YouTube video. Let's begin. Alchemists have access to 5 different flasks, 3 metal transmutes, and 9 elemental transmutes. The crafting of each flask requires an alchemy table, which are only found in 2 places in vanilla WoW. The 40-man raid Blackwing Lair has one located just behind the boss Bloodlord Lash Lair, and the other is found in the dungeon Scholomance in Ra's Frost Whisper's room. Both of these labs are found pretty deep within the dungeon, so you'll have to plan accordingly. Now let's look at each of the flasks. Flask of the Titans is useful for everyone, granting a 1200 health increase. This could give you that slight edge you need if you're planning a 2-hour PvP sesh, but of course it's going to see more use during raids. Most tanks will probably have this buff on during harder raiding progression, but they're not always expected to provide it themselves. Oftentimes preparing these materials for raids ends up being a group effort. Flask of Distilled Wisdom increases your maximum mana by 2,000, and of course is beneficial for all healers. Druids in particular can see a lot of use out of this flask, and I'm not just talking resto druids. Good feral druids utilize all of their mana, and having an extra 2,000 in your mana pool will allow you to use a couple more shapeshifts and mana abilities that you wouldn't be able to use otherwise in your rotation. This is a really good flask, and there's always going to be a demand for it. Flask of Supreme Power, again, can be considered a must-need for all casters because in vanilla WoW, normally melee classes seem to just outwork or produce more damage than spellcasters over an extended period of time. This flask will see a lot of use out of progressive raid guilds, and you could count on making some money off of the herb Dreamfoil for people trying to craft both the Supreme Power and Distilled Wisdom flasks. Flask of Chromatic Resistance. While it may look powerful from the surface, really isn't used in any other scenario rather than maybe you doing some solo PvP and you're not a druid or a paladin. You see, the reason this flask isn't used is because it doesn't stack with Mark of the Wild or Paladin auras, which are far superior to the Chromatic Resistance buff. And then we have Flask of Petrification. This thing's just a joke. Each flask costs 30 stone scale oil and it's a one-time use. But you could have some fun with this flask in the right scenario. Moving on to the elemental transmutes. All 8 elemental transmutes listed on this page share a 24-hour cooldown with each other. Any transmute that an alchemist can make sets a cooldown for all of your other transmutes. So, if you make an Arcanite bar that has a 48-hour cooldown, you'll have to wait 2 days before transmuting fire to earth, or vice versa. The process of transmuting materials is extremely slow, and your cooldown normally isn't used on an earth to life or water to undeath transmute. Rather, it's used to make Arcanite bars, which are much more profitable. But the purpose behind this design was to make transmuting materials a group or a guild effort. All of these regents are used to craft powerful in-game items, and so if you had 15 to 20 alchemists in the guild do a transmute, you could make 1 piece of gear for a guild member a day. Another thing you could do with this ability is to buy a cheaper regent off the auction house and transmute it to a regent that's selling for more than the one you bought it for. Like when the plus 15 agility enchant comes out for gloves in Anchorage, the essence of air will be in high demand, and you may be able to just buy essences of water for cheap and flip it for a profit. Again, this process isn't really used to make money because your Arcanite bar transmutes are going to be the most profitable. Now let's take a look at our last 4 transmutes. We have 3 metal and 1 more elemental transmute. Transmute Arcanite is the #1 transmute you're going to use as an alchemist. You rarely ever use the other recipes, although the transmute to turn a heart to fire into 3 elemental fires is extremely advantageous because it's only got a 10-minute cooldown and it greatly reduces the time spent in farming elemental fires for greater fire protection potions. Now this recipe was added in 1.10 along with all the other catch-up gear in order to speed up the process for raiding and in-game progression. Point is, if this recipe is available at launch, you could seriously look into farming elemental fires and hearts of fires at the same time because they drop from the same mob and you'll end up selling out no problem. Now let's take a look at where each recipe is found. None of these recipes are taught from the trainers, so you're going to have to know where the vendor recipe is or where they drop in the world. Starting off with the flasks, we've got 2 recipes which are dropping off of bosses in Upper Blackrock Spire. The Chromatic Resistance Flask really is useless, but for all the completionists, the recipe drops off of Gith, one of the bosses in the Rin Blackhand encounter. The last boss in Upper Blackrock Spire, General Dracosath, is dropping the desirable Flask of the Titans recipe anywhere between 1 to 5%. You're going to need to travel to Scholomance and kill Balnazar for the Distilled Wisdom recipe. Razfrost Whisper holds the recipe to the Supreme Power Flask and is found in the same room as the Alchemy Lab in Scholomance. Now for the expensive Ice Block. This recipe is a world drop, and although it's not a very useful flask, it will drive completionists crazy to only have 4 out of the 5 flask recipes in Vanilla WoW, and people will likely pay a fortune just to buy this recipe off of you. I do want to point out that all 5 of the flask recipes are not bind on pickup, so you can sell their recipes on the auction house. Now let's look at the elemental transmutes. The Fire to Earth and Elemental Fire transmutes are bought off of vendors in Blackrock Depths, although the Elemental Fire transmute requires you to have a friendly reputation with the Thorian Brotherhood. Earth to Water is bought off of Milosh, a member of the Timbermaw Hold, and you're going to need to become friendly with this already hostile faction in order to obtain this transmute. The Air to Fire recipe is sold off the Argent Dawn vendors and requires an honored reputation. Water to Air is a recipe that's bought off of Magnus Frostwake, who can only be seen after completing a quest chain found just outside of Scholomance. Remember, Magnus holds the recipe for the Greater Mana Potion as well. Now for our World Drop recipes. All 4 of these recipes have a slightly increased chance to drop off of the World Bosses and Raid Bosses listed here, but you could stumble upon one of these recipes anywhere in the world from about level 50 and above. Again, if you find one of these, even though it's not that useful, it's going to be the last piece to the puzzle for a lot of alchemists, and I wouldn't be surprised if you sold it for a small fortune. Now for our metal transmutes. These recipes are bought off of Alchemist Pezzlezug found in Tenaris, who also sells the recipe for the Philosopher's Stone, which is needed before you can create any transmutes. Overall, there are really only 3 flask recipes that are useful, and 2 transmute recipes being the Arcanite Bars and the Elemental Fire transmutes. These are the recipes that are going to make you the most money, and the rest are just kind of there for show. But like I said, this second time around in Classic is going to have plenty of people looking to complete the game with an entire set of transmute recipes on their main, so there is money to be made if you were to stumble upon one of these recipes. Thanks for watching, guys. Leave a like and subscribe for more profession videos in the future, and tell me about anything I may have overlooked and we'll chat it up in the comments. It's your boy, Grace for Days. Outie.